Each season, the Loft plans thematic programming, classes and events, and this winter-spring, the theme is Sense of Adventure. Matt, you're one of our Sense of Adventure teaching artists. Could you introduce yourself and your class?
Hi, my name is Matt Kessen. I do a show called Reverend Matt's Monster Science, and my class is about monsters. I will be talking about the role of monsters in adventure stories in fiction and history, and we'll also be doing a sort of face-off sort of thing in which well, not exactly a face-off, but I'll be asked various monsters will be presented, and I'll be asked whether I would rather go on a date with them, kill them, or ride them as a horse. So the important information that you require.
And so you are a little bit of an expert in all things monster, yes. And
Right.
monsters are inherent to adventures, right? We've seen that from pretty much the dawn of writing. But what does adventure really mean to you in a more specific way?
Well, for me, the word adventure is primarily about wonder, is about new things and exciting things and glorious things, beauty and that sort of thing. Though traditionally, and I think an adventure can just be wonder, but traditionally the definition would certainly include hardship. Normally an adventure is overcoming obstacles and then coming to wonder as a result of it, or even the wonder being part of the obstacles. But to me it's primarily about newness, about things that are exciting intellectually and emotionally because they have not been experienced before, and because they appeal to our sense of beauty and freshness in some way.
And do you have an adventure story, either that you've gone through or something that you've read that just really speaks to you?
Well, we've all had our little. I mean, I've led a fairly sedate life, but we all have our little adventure stories. I think probably my favorite one that really applies at all is the first time I went to Loch Ness, because I'm a person who goes to this sort of places. I don't really believe in most of the monsters, but I like to go to where they're supposed to be, and so my girlfriend at the time and I flew into London, rented a car, and just drove straight on north, because we meant to come back to London and then to Paris as part of the trip. But we drove straight on north, and it was the end of December, and we hung out a little bit in Glasgow on the way up, and then we made our way up north from Glasgow. And night fell, and it was December, and so the days were very short, and this is north even of Minnesota, and so night fell very quickly. And the roads in Scotland are very, very old and very, very winding and twisting, and often one lane, and I don't mean one lane each way, but one lane total. So if someone comes towards you, I don't know what we would have done. We just got lucky, and it was nighttime, and a snowstorm came on, and also the Scottish Highlands. Once you get up into them, I mean, it's strange to think of Scotland this way, because it's, a day's drive from London, one of the, seats of civilization. But Scotland is scary. Scotland is, I mean, on either side of the road, just trees bending in and over us. And it looked like the kind of place where some sort of horror might lurch out of the trees towards us. You can see why the Romans got there and were like, you know what, wall. And so, yeah, so we're doing this driving, this skin of the teeth driving, and the winding, and that we'd be along lakes, and there'd be a cliff on one side, and it was just this nail biting driving. And finally we got to our destination, which was Fort Augustus, which is on one end of Loch Ness, which is a very long, thin lake. And we got to a bed and breakfast, and we just crashed, and we're down. And we woke up the next morning. And we were going to Scotland for me to go to Loch Ness. That was our entire reason. But we woke up next morning and went outside, and Fort Augustus. First of all, Loch Ness is gorgeous. It's in what's called the Great Glen, which is a fault line, and so it's got these mountains on either side, and it's forested and just utterly beautiful as far as nature is concerned. And then Fort Augustus was this picture postcard of a town, just beautiful and quaint in an almost impossible way. If the dead had risen from the grave to massacre the living, they could only have done so just charmingly in Fort Augustus. And then I spent the rest of the day sitting on the edge of Loch Ness looking for a monster that I didn't really expect to see, but it was a marvelous way to relax. And so between sort of the difficulty in getting there and the sort of shining reward once we'd gotten there and gotten our rest. I call that an adventure. That was an adventure that I had.
Yeah, we find out the real adventure is the terrors you have on the way.
Exactly. Yes.
So through most of the reading that I'm sure that you do in your monster expertising, we found that adventure's been told as long as humans have been telling stories, right? And why is it that you think that this is such an enduring and universal topic?
Well, I mean, if you take what I'm, for purposes of this, considering to be the two primary elements of adventure, wonder and danger, these are universal human experiences. I mean, of course, life is hard, everybody goes through difficulties. And so we like to tell stories about people going through even more serious difficulties still, and emerging triumphant. And these are often symbolic of specific things, and sometimes it's external things like the Hydra that Heracles fights. Hydra means water, and the like hydration and that sort of thing. And the thing where you cut off one of its heads and two take its place is thought to be the Hydra was a flood, and they would try to wall it off, but it would just come around. And so the Hydra is thought to be a monstrous representation of a flood. And there's a lot of that. A lot of monsters are direct metaphors for physical things, but then other monsters are about, and I said, like, I've led a fairly calm and sedentary life, but no matter how calm and sedentary a life you've led, no matter how little you've had to worry about, say, flooding, we all have difficulties in our own heads, and some of the monsters are about that. Like the giant motif is one of the ones that's fairly universal. Joseph Campbell's thing about, all cultures telling the same hero story was kind of him getting out his really high quality shoehorn, but giants really do seem to be all over the place. And quite often, although certainly not all the time, giants are ancient and have to be overcome in order for the modern human civilization to arise and prosper. And what this is believed to be by folklorists is that every living human, with the exception of some wolf children, spends the most important learning and formative years of their lives in the company of great big giant people who hold the keys to life and death for them. But eventually they have to strike out on their own and no longer be under that influence of the giants. So giants are a symbolic story of our parents and our need to become independent of them. And so those adventures are a psychological sort of adventure. And then as far as wonder is concerned, I mean, I think wonder is just a native human emotion. Nobody doesn't have wonder. It goes back that Jane Goodall observed that chimpanzees have this display behavior where they just make as much noise as possible to impress each other. And she would notice that they would get together and do their display behavior directed at a waterfall. And even people with the lowest opinion of chimpanzee intelligence aren't going to tell you that the chimpanzees think the waterfall is another chimpanzee. They go drink from it afterwards, but this, to Jane Goodall, and I tend to agree for what it's worth, indicates awe, indicates that the chimpanzees were feeling some sense of wonder. And so it's deep, it's important to human style intelligence, I think. So yeah, that would be my answer.
So much of adventuring, the motifs of adventure often tie into a hero's journey. And for humans, often tie into travel. You're talking about going to Loch Ness. Obviously, right now, that is not as possible as it once was. And so in this time during a pandemic, when so many people are isolated, and the feeling that permeates almost everyone is this anxiety, is just being really, really worried about the state of the world. How have you personally managed to hold on to a sense of adventure, especially what you were talking about with wonder?
Well, like I said, I have a show called Reverend Matt's Monster Science, and historically it's always been a live show. And so I pivoted to make it an online show. I do a live stream once a month on Twitch. And that has been difficult in a lot of ways. It was really hard to set up, and the shift from having an audience to, I mean, you have an audience, there's a chat room, but there's a kind of exchange of energy in a live show with an audience that you just don't get on a live stream. And so it has been difficult in a number of ways, but in the same time, it has been this new thing that I'm doing, this taking something that I do and putting it into the new circumstances. And, you know, and much, though there isn't the exchange of energy, people are obviously enjoying it very much. And that, of course, is very satisfying. So there's still newness to be had, and hence wonder. I mean, I have a friend who's in IT who says he can't imagine what this would have been like just 5 years ago as far as connectivity and the sorts of things that we can do with the internet now. And so in that sense, I mean, obviously this has not been what anyone would call a lucky year, but we're at a point technologically where we can do more than we might have even very recently. And so this is something that can be played with, and this is something that can be explored, and that's what I've done, is sort of explored the online nature of making connections and performing and doing art. And so yeah, so that's been mine, and I'm lucky because I know a lot of people in theater, and you know, they do normal sorts of theater. They do, I mean, it's wonderful and all that, but they you know, they have characters on stage and all that sort of thing. Whereas my live show, I stand at a music stand and I have slides up on a screen. So like sitting here with the bookshelf in the back is not really that big of a pivot. I can still do my same thing. So I'm lucky in that regard. But still, there are ways, I hope there are ways for anyone to explore the options that are now available to us.
And can you give us a little bit more information about your show? Are you doing essentially what you told us before about the giants motif and explaining monsters?
Oh, yes. Sure. Well, I talk about all sorts of different monsters. I talk about, I include prehistoric animals, and I do a lot of mythological creatures and cryptozoology, the ones that people still believe in, and out fictional ones, Godzilla and all that sort of thing. And yeah, and I talk about their histories and their meanings, because monsters are always there for a reason, you know. I mean, sometimes that reason is evolution, but you know, the Hydra is a flood, the giants are childhood, and there's and you know, there's more to it than that. If it were that simple, you wouldn't have to make them into monsters. But yeah, I talk about their history and their meanings, and their permutations, which are always extremely interesting. And yeah, there's a bunch of information. If you can do a deep dive into all kinds of different monsters, and there's a bunch of fascinating stuff, both just about human history and humans' attitudes towards each other, and towards what is outside, and towards nature, and towards anything, depending on what the monster symbolizes. So monsters are a fascinating viewpoint into a lot of sociological and historical and psychological things.
I'm going to ask you a question that's a little bit like asking a writer their favorite book, which is everyone's least favorite question ever. So I apologize, but I'm still going to do it. You have many monsters on and around your person at the moment, but do you have a favorite?
My favorite of all monsters, I do get asked this a lot, and so I have had to come up with an answer. And my very favorite monster is the griffin, the lion eagle hybrid. And there's a lot of reasons that it's my favorite. I like it very much because even in the old Greek material, it's not like a hero killing creature or descended from the gods or anything like that. It's an animal that lives far away. And it's weird that it's part lion and part eagle, but it's just a creature and it does animal stuff. And I don't know, I think that's neat. I think its design is glorious. The majestic lion eagle thing is just fantastic. But more than anything, it's sentimental to me. I had a couple of books as a kid that heavily featured griffins, The Griffin and Alice in Wonderland, and a book by an author called Bill Peet that was based on a griffin. And so it just takes me back. And so and that's fine. Monsters are creatures designed to have emotional resonance, and so my own personal emotional resonance is as good a reason as any, I think.
Oh, I agree. So your class is about monsters, has to do with monsters, but other than just the loads of information that you will be giving, what is it that you really hope students are going to take away?
Other than the loads of information, well, I'm a bit of a comedian as well, so I hope people are entertained. And yeah, there's always it's I do my show at comedy routines as at comedy events as much as I do it at libraries and museums. So I hope they're entertained, and I hope they just take away the fact that monsters are there for a reason. Monsters are symbolic of something. I mean, it's easy. I mean, I get into it myself, but it's easy to just take monsters as cool, you know, as look what they look like and look at what they can do and which one would win in a fight, and that's all great. I talk a lot about that too, but more than anything, I would like people to take away that monsters are symbols and there for a reason. So yeah, I think that'd be that.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt, for being here with us. To our listeners, you can find Matt's class and all of our Sense of Adventure class on the Loft website, which is just loft.org. And your class sounds fantastic, Matt, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to doing it. Thank you so much for having me. This will be super fun.